Welcome back to Karma's Coils. Today, the story you are about to hear takes place amidst the rolling vineyards and golden sunsets of Napa Valley, California. It was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings, a high-end New Year's Eve dinner where the wine flows as freely as the passive-aggressive comments. At the head of the table, my older brother, Caleb, tapped his knife against a crystal flute, demanding the room's attention. He looked polished in a tailored suit that, unbeknownst to the guests, was charged to my credit card. With a charismatic grin that had fooled investors and girlfriends alike for decades, he toasted me. "To my little sister," he began, his voice dripping with faux affection that only I could decode. "To the one who always shows up broke, looking desperate for approval, and is still trying to matter in a room full of adults." My parents laughed. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a full-throated, entertained sound, as if my humiliation was the evening's main course. They mocked me like I was the family joke, a punchline they had been refining for 30 years. I sat there, clutching the stem of my wine glass, feeling the cold condensation against my fingertips. But I didn't cry. I didn't run to the restroom to fix my mascara. Instead, I locked eyes with Caleb, raised my own cup, and silently drank to the one whose rent account I had quietly closed exactly 48 hours ago. The silence that followed my calm, icy stare was perfect. It was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. And right there, under the soft glow of the restaurant's chandeliers, the perfect family facade started collapsing. My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been the invisible financier of this family's lifestyle. The person who wires thousands of dollars quietly, while everyone else poses for Instagram photos and pretends we are flawless. They love to tell their friends I'm so generous. But that night, at that table in Napa, I finally realized they didn't see generosity. They saw a target. They saw someone safe to humiliate because they believed I was too afraid of losing them to ever fight back. So when Caleb turned me into the punchline of his big New Year's speech, I didn't swallow it like I usually did. I didn't smile, look down at my plate of untouched sea bass, and tell myself, it's just his way of showing love. I had spent the entire month of December quietly preparing a different kind of ending, canceling standing orders, gathering bank statements, and replaying every time they laughed at my expense. That toast was supposed to be my public execution. Instead, it became my line in the sand. Before I tell you exactly what happened after that glass was raised, who cried, who begged, and who found themselves facing a very real eviction notice alone, tell me in the comments. What time is it for you right now? And where are you listening from? I want to see how far this dinner table disaster travels. I'm Elena, 34 years old, the responsible one who never moved back home, never asked for a handout, and somehow still ended up paying everyone else's bills. I work as a senior project manager for a tech firm in Seattle, which sounds lucrative until you realize it mostly means 60-hour weeks, managing crises, and smoothing over other people's messes in high-stakes boardrooms. Funny thing is, that's exactly what I also did for my family, just without the stock options or the quarterly bonus. On paper, we looked perfect. Two parents who retired comfortably in the suburbs, two kids who grew up with piano lessons and summer camps, family photos at Thanksgiving with coordinated sweaters and captions like, "Blessed beyond measure." But what you don't see in those perfectly filtered pictures are the late-night bank transfers, the emergency credit card payments, the rent money I sent just this once that somehow turned into a monthly subscription service for my brother's lifestyle. For years, I have been the invisible backbone of this family, the person who wires money quietly from a bathroom stall during a work break while everyone else poses for pictures and pretends we're flawless. It started small, a temporary loan for car repairs here, a "we'll pay you back next week for groceries there." At first, I felt proud. I thought, I'm finally useful. I can help. I can make life easier for the people I love. Then the tone started to shift. The requests stopped sounding like requests. They started sounding like entitlement. If I hesitated, or if I asked why Caleb needed another $1,000 when he just posted a photo of a new watch, there'd be guilt. You know the script. We're struggling more than you, Elena. You don't have kids. You live alone in the city. You're doing fine, right? The worst part wasn't the money. It was the way they categorized me. I was the one who chose a career over a family, the one who pours all her love into her spreadsheets and her banking app. The one who served as the financial foundation that kept everyone afloat, but somehow still wasn't successful enough to be respected as a person, only as a resource. One gray afternoon in mid-December, amidst the bustle of a Seattle coffee shop, my phone lit up with a notification that made my stomach turn. It was Caleb. The message didn't start with, "How are you?" or "Merry Christmas." It was just, asterisk, "Hey, landlord is on my back. Rent hits on the 3rd. You know the drill. Appreciate you." Asterisk. No question mark, no please. Just the confident assumption that I would fall in line like I always had. He treated my bank balance like a utility boring, expected, and essential for his survival. I stared at the screen, and for the first time, I didn't feel the usual urge to fix it. I felt something inside me harden into ice. That was the day I opened my bank app, not to transfer more money, but to finally look at the damage I had allowed. I scrolled through the transaction history with his name attached to it, page after page of Zelle transfers, Venmo requests, and direct deposits. I realized I had paid the equivalent of a luxury sedan for a man who still felt entitled to call me desperate as a joke to his drinking buddies. Have you ever looked at your transaction history and realized it's actually a history of how much you've been taken for granted? If you have, you already know why that New Year's toast was never going to end the way he thought it would. It wasn't just the money, it was the audacity. He would stand there and call me broke because I drove a practical car and packed my lunch, while he drove a leased Porsche paid for by the family fund, which was just a polite name for my savings. I saw it clearly now. It wasn't love, it was death by 1,000 cuts. I stood up, left my half-finished latte, and walked 2 blocks to my bank branch. I didn't want to do this online. I needed to feel the weight of the decision physically. I stood at the counter, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline, and told the teller, "I need to proceed with closing the account linked to these automatic transfers." The teller looked at the screen and paused. "This is the rent account set up for the property in Napa, correct? It's been active for 3 years. Are you sure?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yes. I'm done." Walking out of that bank, I didn't feel guilty. I felt a surge of self-respect that I hadn't felt in a decade. I had the receipts, I had the closure confirmation, and I knew that in 2 weeks we would be sitting down for dinner in Napa. I didn't know exactly how it would play out, but I knew this. The next time he raised a glass at my expense, I wasn't going to let it slide. Our New Year's dinner took place at a sprawling vineyard resort where my company had helped negotiate a corporate discount for my family. To anyone watching from the outside, we looked like a postcard of Californian perfection, matching outfits in shades of slate and cream, cocktails garnished with rosemary, and a stunning view of the sunset over the vines. My mother made sure to get photos of us clinking glasses, her smile perfectly rehearsed. My father cracked dad jokes for the server, who laughed politely. And Caleb kept the staff entertained with his fake charm, ordering the most expensive bottle on the list without glancing at the price. If you'd scrolled past us on social media, you'd probably think, "Wow, that's a close, happy family." What you wouldn't know is that I'd used my employee discount to get those rooms, paid for the upgrades, and put the deposit on my credit card so everyone could relax without worrying about the bill. It wasn't the first time Caleb used a toast to turn me into a spectacle. 2 years earlier at Thanksgiving, he'd stood up with a glass of Pinot Noir and announced, "Here's to Elena," who somehow paid off my car before she paid off her own student loans. Priorities, right? Everyone laughed. I laughed too, even though my chest burned with humiliation. Later that night, alone in the guest room, I'd stared at my banking app and watched my balance shrink while debt still loomed over me. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself, it's family, that's what you do. But years of jokes like that add up. The time he told my childhood friend at a barbecue, Elena's the family ATM, put in guilt, get out cash. The time my parents chuckled when he said, "She doesn't have kids, so she pays for all of us. It's fair." None of them saw it as cruelty. They saw it as our family dynamic. I saw it as a slow erosion of my dignity. In the days before New Year's, that history replayed in my head like a highlight reel I never asked for. I watched Caleb at the resort pool brag about his new gaming console, the one he'd bought the same month he couldn't cover his rent. I listened to my parents brag to another couple about how Elena's doing so well. She helps out her brother when he needs it, like I was some walking charitable foundation instead of their daughter. And somewhere between their bragging and his bragging, I realized something. Nobody here was ever going to voluntarily change. If I wanted respect, I was going to have to take it. The night of the dinner, the restaurant was buzzing with other families counting down to midnight. But at our table, it felt like we were rehearsing the same tired script we'd performed for years. We had a big round table near the window, the kind people usually fight over because of the view of the valley. My parents were in high spirits, talking loudly about resolutions they'd never keep. And Caleb was already performing, telling jokes, charming the server, making sure eyes drifted back to him. I sat there perfectly composed, the responsible one position I'd been assigned since I was old enough to understand what a bill was. Nobody noticed how quiet I was because they'd gotten used to me disappearing into the background as long as the check always got paid on time. As appetizers arrived, the small comments started, the tiny needles before the knife. My mother leaned toward me, her voice low but casual, like she was asking me to pass the salt. "You'll help your brother with that job application after the holidays, right? You're so good with this stuff, honey." She didn't ask if I had time, or if I wanted to. It was a statement disguised as a compliment. My father joined in. Not malicious, just automatic. "Yeah, Elena always figures it out. She's the planner. She'll get him set up." To them, I wasn't just a daughter. I was a utility. Wi-Fi, electricity, emotional support, job coach, and emergency fund, all bundled into one human being. I smiled tightly, my fingers wrapped a little too firmly around my glass, feeling the cold against my palm keep me grounded. Then Caleb, who I'll finally name properly now, leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and tossed out the kind of line that always landed a laugh. "Elena's not just the planner. She's the sponsor. Couldn't survive a year without our in-house investor." My parents chuckled in that familiar way, half in on the joke, half proud that their son was so funny. I didn't laugh. Instead, I tilted my head and asked as casually as I could manage, "Sponsor, huh? That what we're calling it now?" Caleb grinned like he'd just scored. "Well, you do keep the lights on, don't you? I mean, be honest. If you stopped helping, a lot of things would fall apart." He said it like it was praise, but it sounded like a threat wrapped in a compliment. It was a reminder. They believed I couldn't stop, that my role was fixed, that my sense of responsibility was a leash they could tug whenever they wanted. While they laughed, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down and saw his name lighting up the screen with a message I didn't even need to open to understand. Another reminder about rent due next week. Another casual, "You got me, yeah?" As if my bank account was just an extension of his. I opened the message anyway. Asterisk, "Hey, just a heads up. Rent hits on the 3rd. You know the drill. Appreciate you. Asterisk, no question mark, no please." Just confidence that I would fall in line like I always had. Something inside me didn't shatter. It clicked. Not breaking, but locking. I looked up at Caleb and finally saw him clearly, stripped of nostalgia and excuses. This wasn't my funny older brother who used to walk me to school. This was a man who had been trained by years of unspoken permission to believe I existed to absorb his consequences. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about what I'd done earlier that week, standing at the bank counter and saying, "I'd like to close this account," my voice shaking with a mix of fear and relief. I remembered the way the banker had asked, "Are you sure? It's been active for a while." I'd swallowed and said, "Yes, I'm done." That memory steadied me now. I watched Caleb raise his glass, stand up, and clear his throat, his smile flipping on like a stage light. The restaurant's noise dipped a little as people instinctively turned toward the sound of clinking glass. My parents straightened in their seats, eyes bright, ready for one of his legendary speeches. I felt my heart beating hard in my chest, but it wasn't the terrified pounding I used to feel when I thought about confrontation. It was something sharper, clearer. I already knew he was going to use me as material. He always did. But this time, I wasn't bracing to endure it. I was waiting for the exact moment I'd decided weeks ago to finally push back. Tell me honestly, have you ever sat at a table with people you love and suddenly realize they're completely comfortable feeding on your sacrifices because they've never seen you say no? Caleb tapped his knife against his glass with the confidence of someone who had never been told he'd gone too far. The clear, bright clinking cut through the air, pulling not just our family's attention, but the curiosity of a few nearby tables. He loved that. Eyes on him, center stage, the star of the perfect family act. "All right, everyone," he announced, voice loud enough to carry. "Before we ring in the new year, I want to make a very special toast." My parents smiled like they were about to watch a favorite scene in a movie they'd already memorized. I already knew the genre too. Comedy at my expense with a side of, "It's just a joke, Elena. Don't be so sensitive." I just didn't know exactly how low he'd go this time until he opened his mouth. "To the one who always shows up," he began, turning his gaze toward me. His eyes had that familiar twinkle of mischief he believed was harmless. Broke, desperate, and still trying to matter. The words landed like a slap I'd seen coming, but hoped wouldn't hit as hard as they did. A small ripple of laughter rolled around the table. My mother covered her mouth, half laughing, half playing at being shocked. My father shook his head with a grin like, "That's our boy. Always joking." A couple at the table next to us glanced over and smiled in that polite, detached way, assuming it was all innocent family banter. Caleb wasn't done. He never stopped when he saw a reaction. "Let's raise a glass," he continued, lifting his drink higher. "To the person who proves you don't need a savings account if you've got a saint for a sibling. To the one who somehow manages to be both broke and the family bank at the same time." That got a bigger laugh from my parents. My mother said, "Oh, Caleb," like he was a stand-up comedian, not a grown man publicly humiliating his sister. My father added, "You're terrible," in that indulgent tone that really meant, "Keep going. We're entertained." Inside my chest, something went very, very quiet. It wasn't that I was numb, it was that everything suddenly came into focus. In that moment, I realized Caleb wasn't just teasing me. He was rewriting the story of my life out loud, in front of witnesses, in a way that made my sacrifices look like weakness instead of proof of how much I'd given. In his version, I was broke because I was pathetic, not because I'd been paying his rent. I was desperate because I didn't have a husband or kids. Not because I'd spent years twisting myself into knots trying to keep everyone else comfortable. I was still trying to matter because in his eyes my worth began and ended with what I could do for him and apparently what he could do with me as a joke. I didn't wait for the last of the laughter to die. I picked up my glass and stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every year I'd stayed silent press against my spine and then lift. My voice, when it came, was steady enough that people at nearby tables turned to listen. "To the one," I said, eyes locked on Caleb, whose rent account I just closed. The smirk on his face flickered, then faltered entirely. My parents froze, their glasses hovering awkwardly mid-air. The couple next to us stopped pretending not to listen. This wasn't the script they were expecting. I didn't give anyone time to pivot. "To the one," I continued, "who thinks it's hilarious to call me broke and desperate when the only reason he's not packing his stuff out of a rented apartment right now is because I've been quietly wiring money every month." I tilted my glass toward him. "To the one who turned every sacrifice I made into material for cheap punchlines." The chatter in the restaurant blurred into a dull background hum. At our table, it felt like the air had thickened to something you could almost slice. Caleb opened his mouth, but the usual quick response wasn't there. My mother let out a soft, panicked laugh. "Elena, honey, it's just a joke. No need to." "No," I cut in, not raising my voice, but sharpening it. "The joke is that you all think this is normal." I could feel my heart slamming against my ribs, and my palms were slick. But the fear I used to have whenever I imagined a moment like this was gone. In its place was a strange electric calm. I turned my gaze back to Caleb. "You want to call me broke? Let's talk about what I've been spending money on. Your overdue rent, your emergency bills, your last time I swear month." His jaw clenched. "Elena, sit down. You're making this weird," he muttered through his teeth, still trying to cling to control to whatever charm he thought he had left. I took a slow sip of my drink instead. "No, I'm making it honest." I let the silence stretch now, deliberately watching them squirm in it the way I'd been forced to sit through their laughter for years. For once, their silence didn't feel like a muzzle on me. It felt like a mirror held up to them. Their faces said what their mouths couldn't yet admit. They had never considered what it would look like if I chose not to play my role. I set my glass back on the table, the soft clink sounding like a full stop at the end of a sentence I'd been writing my whole life. "So here's my toast," I finished. "To the year I stop being your punchline and start being the person who finally says no." I took another sip, slower this time, and let the weight of my words sit there. If you were sitting in my seat with everyone staring, their perfect little image cracking right in front of you, tell me honestly, would you have swallowed it to keep the peace, or would you have raised your glass too? Caleb tried to recover first, like he always did when one of his jokes landed wrong. He let out this forced little laugh and rolled his eyes as if I'd just overreacted to a harmless tease. Come on, Elena, he said, voice dipping low, but still sharp enough to cut. Don't be dramatic. It's New Year's. I was just joking around. His tone wobbled ever so slightly on the word joking, like even he wasn't fully convinced. My mother jumped in right on cue, her smile stretched too tight. Yeah, honey, it was just a joke. No need to turn this into a big scene, she said, her hand fluttering toward my arm, but not quite landing. My father cleared his throat the way he always did when he wanted to keep the peace without actually taking a stand. Let's all calm down, he muttered. It was their pattern, their muscle memory. Minimize, deflect, smooth it over. It had worked every other time. But this time, I was ready for that too. I set my glass down slowly, feeling the stem press into my fingers, and reached into my bag for my phone. I wasn't fumbling or scrambling. I was executing something I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times in the quiet moments between bank transfers and apologies. I unlocked the screen, opened the notes app I'd prepared days before the trip, and let the glow from the phone light up my face. You're right, I said evenly, looking from Caleb to my parents. We should keep this from becoming a scene. So, let's just tell the whole joke, shall we? I scrolled until I hit the list. Rows of dates and dollar amounts stared back at me. January 3rd, I read aloud, my voice steady. $1,850. Rent. February 4th, $1,850. March 15th, $1,850 plus $650 for overdue utilities because you said they were going to shut off your power. April 2nd, $2,200 when your Porsche suddenly needed new tires. I glanced up. Caleb's face was losing color in real time. My mother's hand went to her chest. My father's brow furrowed, some calculation flickering behind his eyes. I looked back at my screen. May. Rent again, plus overdraft fees. You forgot to mention June $1,500 toward your credit card payments because you said the collectors were calling your office. Should I keep going, or is the punchline starting to land? The table had gone from festive to funeral in under a minute. The server passing by slowed her step, sensing something was off, but smart enough not to interrupt. Nearby conversations dimmed, not fully silent, but softened, like the air around us was suddenly thinner. You wrote it all down? My father asked, his voice quieter than I'd heard it in years. There was no anger in it, just a kind of stunned disbelief. Someone had to, I replied. Because while you were all laughing tonight about how broke I am, I was staring at my bank app trying to figure out how to make minimum payments on cards I maxed out, keeping your son from getting evicted. Caleb leaned forward, his expression twisting from embarrassment into anger. You didn't have to do any of that, he snapped. I never forced you. You offered. You're the one who likes to play hero. I met his glare head on. No, you're right. You didn't put a gun to my head. You just sent texts like, if you don't help, I don't know what I'll do, and you're the only one who has my back. And don't tell Mom and Dad, they'll freak out. You just made sure every crisis sounded like it was my responsibility to fix. That's not force, but it's also not innocent, my mother whispered. We didn't realize it was that much, like the volume of the number mattered more than the weight of the pattern. I turned to her. You didn't ask, I said. You were too busy laughing at the family ATM jokes and bragging to other people about how your daughter is so generous while quietly nudging me to bail him out again and again. My father looked at Caleb now, not with indulgence, but with something closer to disappointment. Is this true? He asked. Caleb bristled. Everybody borrows money sometimes. It's not a big deal. Elena's making it sound worse than it is. I lifted my phone again. Total for this year alone, I said, not counting the years before. $24,850.75. I let that number sit there, heavy and undeniable. If you think I'm exaggerating, I can send you screenshots. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's eyes were shiny, not just with hurt, but with the dawning awareness that the version of events they had been comfortable with all this time might not have been the truth. Caleb tried one more time to twist it. So what? You want a medal? You want us to bow down and worship you because you helped family? His voice was bitter now, his bravado cracking. That's what people do for each other. No, I said, my tone almost gentle. What people do for each other is help when they can and respect limits when they're given. What you did was treat my help like a subscription you never had to renew and a joke you could tell whenever you needed a laugh. I took a breath and felt my hand shaking, but now it was from adrenaline, not fear. I closed the rent account, I continued, directing my words back at Caleb. There are no more automatic transfers. I canceled the recurring payment last week. If you want to keep your place in Napa, you'll have to figure it out yourself. Get a second job. Sell your Porsche. Talk to your landlord like an adult. But the days of forwarding your panic to me and calling it family are over. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like he was flipping through internal scripts and none of them fit the moment. So that's it? He finally managed. You're just cutting me off after everything we've been through? After everything I've paid for, I corrected. I'm finally treating myself like someone who deserves more than being your safety net and your punchline at the same time. My mother tried again, flailing for the version of reality that made her most comfortable. Maybe we can come up with some kind of plan, she said. Elena, you could help him just until he's stable, and I held up a hand. No, that word right there. Just until. This has lasted for years. Just this once. Just this month. Just until things calm down. Things never calm down because there's no reason for them to as long as I absorb the fallout. At some point, I noticed that my shoulders had dropped, that the knot in my stomach I'd been carrying into every dinner, every holiday, every bank visit had loosened. The restaurant around us was still decorated with glittering banners and countdown signs. But at our table, the shine was gone. The image of the perfect family had hairline fractures running straight through it, and for the first time, I didn't rush to smooth them over. I let them show. Caleb stared at me like I'd betrayed him. What he didn't understand was that the real betrayal had been years of using my kindness as a given and my humiliation as entertainment. You're choosing money over family, he hissed. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. I'm choosing self-respect over being used. There's a difference. Around us, plates were still full, glasses still half raised, and the world was still spinning toward midnight. But in that moment, sitting there with my phone in my hand and their stunned faces staring back at me, I knew a chapter had closed. They weren't looking at the broke, desperate version of me that Caleb had just tried to perform. They were seeing a different person entirely. The version who was finally willing to let their idea of a good daughter die if it meant I could stop drowning in expectations. And now I'm going to ask you something. How many times have you let people cross your boundaries because it was easier than watching their opinion of you change? And if you were me, would you have drawn the line in public like that, or waited for a private conversation that might never actually happen? We didn't make it to midnight together. My mother tried to patch it over, suggesting we talk about this tomorrow, but there was no tomorrow I wanted with things the way they'd been. I put my napkin on the table, stood up, and said quietly, I'm going back to my room. You can stay and enjoy the rest of your perfect night. No one followed me. Not at first. I walked out of the restaurant to the sound of music and countdown timers on screens, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter, even with my heart pounding. Later that night, there was a knock on my door. It was my father standing in the hallway, looking older than I remembered. You should have told us, he said softly. I shook my head. I tried in little ways. Every time I said I was tired, you called me dramatic. Every time I hinted that I couldn't keep paying, you reminded me how much your parents did for you. Do you realize how many times I chose Caleb's rent over my own peace of mind? He didn't have an answer. He just sighed and said, We'll figure something out. For once, I replied. You will. I already did. The next month was ugly. Caleb sent me long, angry texts about how I'd abandoned him, how I'd embarrassed him in front of our parents, how I'd turned a little joke into a war. When his landlord finally issued a notice, he forwarded that too, as if a screenshot could magically drain money from my bank account. I didn't respond. I muted the chat and redirected the energy I would have spent saving him into paying down my own debt and planning my own life. My parents called, trying to convince me to help just this once more. I told them calmly. Every once more is what got us here. No. Flash forward 6 months. I'm sitting in a small cafe in Seattle near my apartment, laptop open, working on a side project I'd been putting off for years because I was always too busy dealing with everyone else's emergencies. The doorbell jingles, and in walks Caleb. He looks tired in a way I haven't seen before. Not the lazy kind of tired, but the I've been grinding kind. He spots me and hesitates, then walks over. "Hey," he mutters. I nod. We sit in silence for a moment. Not thick and suffocating this time, but cautious. "I got a second job," he says finally. "Wasn't fun. Still isn't. But I'm paying my own rent now." I don't congratulate him like he's a child. I just nod again. "Good." He swallows. "I was mad at you for a long time. Thought you were being cruel. But I looked back at our messages. It was always me asking. I don't think I realized how much." I raise an eyebrow. "You called me broke in front of our parents." He winces. "Yeah, I was projecting. You know that, right? Doesn't make it hurt less," I say. "But I'm glad you finally see it." He looks down at his hands. "I don't expect you to start paying for me again. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. And I'm sorry." For a second, I see the boy he used to be. The one who shared his Halloween candy with me, who taught me to ride a bike, who stood between me and kids who teased me in middle school. I don't rush to forgive him, but I also don't shut the door in his face. "Trying is a start," I say. "Respecting my boundaries is the rest." Our family didn't magically transform into a healthy unit overnight. There are still uncomfortable phone calls, still habits they're unlearning way too slowly. But that one toast changed everything because it forced me to choose their comfort or my dignity. I chose my dignity. The bill for that choice was heavy distance, arguments, awkward holidays. But for the first time, I'm not paying it alone. So now I'm asking you, if you were in my shoes, would you ever let your brother back in after something like this? Do you think, Elena, that is, I should forgive completely one day or keep things at arm's length for good? Tell me in the comments what you'd do. Because somewhere out there, another family bank is quietly deciding whether tonight is finally the night they close the account. This story has been a journey through the tangled vines of family obligation and the rocky soil of self-worth. At Karma's Coils, we are dedicated to unearthing emotional narratives that challenge us to look at our own lives with fresh eyes. We promise that while our stories are crafted for your reflection, the lessons within them are as real as the boundaries we must set for ourselves. This script shines a light on the often overlooked cost of being the strong one and reminds us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.